I'm Audrey Mitchell, 32, and my life imploded during what should have been an ordinary Sunday dinner. My parents delivered an ultimatum that left me speechless: sell my cherished home to my younger sister Megan at a ridiculous discount, or be disowned from the family. It seemed impossible to comprehend, even after years of their favoritism toward her. What they didn't know was that I'd soon uncover the truth about Megan's CEO husband Eric and his crumbling business empire. Before I dive into this nightmare that's been keeping me up at night, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let me know if you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and your own financial security. To understand how I ended up facing this impossible choice, you need to know a bit about my family dynamic. I grew up in a middle-class neighborhood in suburban Boston, with parents who worked steady jobs, dad in insurance, mom as an elementary school teacher. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. From the beginning, though, there was a clear favorite in the family, and it wasn't me. Megan came along when I was 4, and from that moment, she became the center of my parents' universe. Where I was expected to be responsible and self-sufficient, Megan was coddled and protected. When I needed new school clothes, I was told to be practical and budget-conscious. When Megan wanted the trendy outfits, my parents found a way to make it happen. This wasn't just my perception. Neighbors, relatives, even Megan herself would joke about being the princess of the family. I learned early on that if I wanted something, I needed to earn it myself. By 16, I was working part-time at a local coffee shop while maintaining honor roll grades. Meanwhile, my parents discouraged Megan from getting a job so she could focus on her studies and participate in extracurricular activities they believed would look good on college applications. When college came around, I pieced together scholarships, loans, and my savings to attend the state university. I lived in the cheapest dorm, ate ramen more often than I care to remember, and graduated with a business degree and a determination to build a career in real estate. My parents attended my graduation but spent most of the day talking about Megan's upcoming college selection process. For Megan, they paid full tuition at a private college, covered her apartment rent, and gave her a monthly allowance that exceeded what I earned working 20 hours a week on top of my full course load. When she graduated, they threw her an extravagant party. For my graduation, we had dinner at the local Italian restaurant where I received a card with a $100 gift certificate. Despite these differences, I never resented Megan herself. How could I blame her for accepting what was freely given? But I did promise myself that I would build my own security, never depending on anyone else for my stability. After college, I threw myself into real estate. I started as an assistant at a boutique agency, making coffee and organizing paperwork while absorbing everything I could about the business. I worked nights and weekends, saved aggressively, and built a reputation as someone who would go the extra mile for clients. By 28, I was one of the top producing agents in my firm, specializing in identifying up-and-coming neighborhoods before they became hot markets. Megan, meanwhile, drifted between marketing jobs, never staying at one company for more than a year, with my parents always ready to help her financially during her transitions. When she met Eric Rhodes at a charity gala, my parents were thrilled. Eric was the CEO of a local tech startup, drove a Tesla, and talked confidently about disrupting industries and scaling vertically. Within 6 months they were engaged, and my parents contributed significantly to their lavish wedding. When Megan and Eric decided to buy their first home, my parents helped with the down payment. When I found my house, a modest 1930s 3-bedroom with good bones in a transitioning neighborhood, I received concerned lectures about dangerous areas and throwing money away. I remember my father saying, "Why would you buy that old thing when you could get something move-in ready in a better neighborhood?" What they didn't understand was that I saw potential where they saw problems. I'd researched the neighborhood extensively and knew that several major developments were planned that would transform the area within 5 years. I was right. Property values have nearly tripled since I purchased, and now my risky investment is worth far more than Megan and Eric's sensible home in an established suburb. My dating life hasn't been as successful as my career. I recently ended a 3-year relationship with Kevin, a software developer who ultimately couldn't reconcile himself to my work schedule and ambition. At family gatherings following our breakup, my mother frequently commented on how Megan and Eric's marriage was so solid and how some people prioritize work over relationships. The irony that they'd raised me to be self-sufficient while criticizing the results wasn't lost on me. Throughout our adult years, my parents maintained their pattern of expecting me to help out Megan. When she needed a car but had spent her savings on a vacation, I was expected to loan her money. When she needed childcare for her 2 kids, I was guilted into rearranging my work schedule to babysit, while my parents were too busy with their retirement activities. I'd long ago accepted this dynamic, establishing boundaries where I could while maintaining family peace. What I couldn't possibly have anticipated was how this lifelong favoritism would evolve into the ultimatum that would test not just my financial resolve, but my sense of self-worth. My house wasn't much to look at when I first toured it 5 years ago. Built in 1938, it had weathered siding, outdated bathrooms, and a kitchen straight out of the 1970s, complete with avocado-colored appliances and peeling linoleum floors. But beneath the cosmetic issues, I saw incredible potential. The oak floors under the worn carpet were in perfect condition. The layout was open and flowing with large windows that flooded the rooms with natural light. The backyard was deep and private, with mature maple trees providing shade in summer. Located in the Riverside district, the neighborhood was undergoing the early stages of revitalization. A new light rail station was planned just 6 blocks away, and the city had approved funding for street improvements and a small park. Several boutique businesses had already taken a chance on the main commercial street, including a coffee shop that became my weekend office as I planned renovations. I negotiated hard and purchased the house for $285,000, stretching myself financially but confident in my investment. My colleagues thought I was crazy. "You could get something move-in ready in Hampshire Heights for that price," my broker said. But Hampshire Heights wasn't going to appreciate the way Riverside would. I knew this neighborhood intimately from my real estate work. I'd been tracking property values, development permits, and commercial leases for years. The renovation process was both exhilarating and exhausting. I took 2 weeks of vacation to tackle the initial projects myself, ripping out carpet, scrubbing walls, painting every surface. For the specialized work, I called in favors from contractors I'd worked with through my real estate business, scheduling them around their larger jobs to save money. Many weekends found me covered in dust, learning plumbing basics from YouTube tutorials or carefully stripping decades of paint from original wood trim. Every dollar went toward maximizing the home's character while modernizing its functionality. I preserved the arched doorways and crown molding while opening up the kitchen to the dining room. I rescued the clawfoot tub but added a glass shower in the master bathroom. The original hardwood floors were sanded and refinished to a warm honey glow that anchored the entire design. For nearly a year, I lived with plastic sheeting separating finished from unfinished spaces. I cooked on a hot plate and washed dishes in the bathtub for 3 weeks during the kitchen renovation. There were nights I fell asleep crying from exhaustion, wondering if I'd taken on too much. But gradually, room by room, my vision came to life. The house became more than an investment, it became a physical manifestation of my independence and resilience. Every creaking floorboard and restored window frame told the story of my determination. When I finally finished the last major project, a built-in bookcase in the living room, I hosted a small housewarming party. My friends marveled at the transformation, taking before and after photos and congratulating me on my vision. My parents and Megan attended too, though their comments were tepid at best. "It's cozy," my mother said, in a tone that suggested she meant small. My father pointed out that the basement still needed work, while Megan wondered aloud why I'd waste money on an old house instead of buying new construction. They left early, citing the need to help Megan's babysitter with the kids. Their lack of enthusiasm couldn't diminish my pride, however. I'd taken a neglected property and transformed it into not just a beautiful home, but a significant asset. As I predicted, the neighborhood continued its upward trajectory. The light rail station opened, property values escalated, and national publications began featuring Riverside as an up-and-coming area with historic charm and urban convenience. Last month, I had the house appraised for a potential refinance. The appraiser walked through with wide eyes, noting the original details I'd preserved and the thoughtful updates. When the report came back valuing the property at $875,000, I wasn't surprised, but I was deeply satisfied. The appraisal confirmed what I already knew: my instincts had been right, my hard work had paid off, and I'd created substantial equity through my vision and effort. My plans for the property evolved as my career progressed. Initially, I'd envisioned selling after 5 years to leverage the equity into a larger investment. But as I put down roots in the neighborhood and built relationships with neighbors, I began to see longer-term potential. With real estate prices continuing to climb, the house could provide rental income in the future if I decided to move or expand to a second property. The basement could potentially be converted to an accessory dwelling unit, creating additional income or space for aging parents down the road. This house represented not just financial security but emotional validation. After years of being the less favored child, I'd proven my capability and foresight. I'd made something valuable entirely on my own: no parental help, no financial cushion, just hard work and smart decision-making. When friends visited, they often commented on how perfectly the house reflected my personality: warm, welcoming, with attention to detail and a respect for history while embracing modern life. "This place is so you," my friend Rachel said during a wine night on my restored front porch. "It feels like walking into a physical representation of your soul." I couldn't have articulated it better myself. This house was more than wood and plaster, it was my heart made visible. Which is why what happened next felt like more than a financial discussion, it felt like an attack on my very identity. Monthly Sunday dinners at my parents' house had been a tradition since Megan and I reached adulthood. Though often stressful, I maintained the ritual out of a sense of family obligation and the hope that, over time, my parents might develop a greater appreciation for my accomplishments. This particular Sunday in early April seemed no different from dozens before it. I arrived at 5 p.m. sharp with a bottle of wine and a homemade apple pie, baking being one of the skills I'd developed during my home renovation phase. My parents' house was the same split level where we'd grown up, though they'd remodeled several times over the years. Family photos lined the hallway, predominantly featuring Megan's major life events and her children, with my graduation photo relegated to a small frame near the bathroom. I'd long ago stopped noticing this imbalance, accepting it as simply the way things were. Mom was busy in the kitchen, preparing her signature pot roast. "Megan and Eric are running a bit late," she informed me with the indulgent tone reserved for my sister's perpetual tardiness. "The kids had soccer practice." I nodded, offering to help with dinner preparations while Dad watched golf in the living room, occasionally calling out comments about the players' performances. At 5:45, 45 minutes past our agreed meeting time, the front door burst open with the chaos that always accompanied my sister's family. 7-year-old Emma and 5-year-old Jacob ran in shouting about soccer goals and snacks, while Megan followed with an oversized designer handbag and Eric trailed behind, still talking loudly on his cell phone about quarterly projections and investor confidence. I couldn't help but notice they'd arrived in a brand new Range Rover, replacing the Mercedes they'd purchased just 18 months earlier. Eric ended his call as he entered, flashing his practiced CEO smile. "Sorry we're late, traffic was a nightmare," he announced, though the drive from their house took exactly 12 minutes according to Google Maps. Dinner proceeded with the usual dynamic, my parents asking Megan and Eric detailed questions about their recent Bahamas vacation, the children's activities, and Eric's business developments, while occasionally tossing me cursory inquiries about how work is going. I shared news about a record-breaking sale I'd closed the previous week, only to have the conversation quickly redirected to Jacob's soccer achievements. After dinner, as I began clearing dishes, my father cleared his throat in the way he always did before making what he considered an important announcement. "Why don't we all move to the living room? There's something we'd like to discuss as a family." The formality of his tone immediately set off warning bells. I glanced at Megan, who avoided eye contact, suddenly very interested in her wine glass. Mom looked nervous, fidgeting with her napkin. Only Eric appeared completely at ease, with the slightly smug expression he often wore during business discussions. Once we were seated in the living room, my parents on their sectional sofa, Megan and Eric in matching armchairs, and me perched on an ottoman, Dad began what was clearly a prepared speech. Audrey, your mother and I have been thinking about family and the importance of supporting each other. As you know, Emma will be starting second grade next year, and the school district where Megan and Eric live isn't performing as well as they'd hoped. I nodded cautiously, unsure where this was heading. We've all seen how well your neighborhood has developed, he continued. The school there is now one of the top-rated in the city. And your house, well, it's become quite valuable, hasn't it? My stomach tightened as I began to sense the direction of this conversation. Megan and Eric need a larger home in a better school district, Mom interjected, her voice taking on the pleading tone she'd used throughout our childhood when trying to convince me to give up something for my sister's benefit. With 2 growing children, they really need more space and that wonderful backyard you have. I sat in stunned silence as the true purpose of this family discussion emerged through a series of increasingly direct statements. My parents, along with Megan and Eric, had decided that I should sell my house to my sister and her husband at what my father termed a family discount. We think $525,000 would be fair, Eric stated confidently, as if closing a routine business deal. That's a significant profit for you, considering what you paid originally. My mind raced as I processed this figure, nearly $350,000 below the recent appraisal value. Almost 40% of my home's equity would simply be handed to my sister because, why? Because she wanted it? That's not possible, I finally managed, trying to keep my voice steady. The house appraised at $875,000 last month. And honestly, I have no interest in selling at all. I love my home. My father's expression hardened. This isn't about market value, Audrey. This is about family. Your sister needs a good environment for her children. Surely you can understand that? It's not like you have children to consider. The casual cruelty of his statement, the implication that my life and needs were less valuable because I didn't have children, struck like a physical blow. I understand that Megan wants a nice house in a good school district, I replied carefully. But there are other homes available in my neighborhood. I can help her find something similar. We don't want something similar, Megan interrupted, speaking up for the first time. We want your house. We've already imagined how we'd arrange the furniture, which bedroom would be Emma's and which would be Jacob's. The kids are excited about it. The entitlement in her voice was breathtaking. They had planned this entirely without my input, assuming I would simply acquiesce as I had so many times before. I'm sorry, but no, I said firmly. I'm not selling my house. Especially not at a massive discount. What followed was a scene that would have seemed outlandish in a television drama. My father's face flushed dark red as he stood up, pointing his finger directly at me. After everything we've done for you, he said, voice trembling with anger, this is how you repay us? By refusing to help your sister when she needs you. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Everything you've done for me? Dad, I put myself through college. I bought that house without any help from you, in fact, despite your active discouragement. I renovated it myself while working full-time. My mother began crying, her go-to response whenever she didn't get her way. We always knew you were selfish, Audrey, but I never thought you'd put a house above your own family. Eric stepped in with what he clearly thought was a reasonable compromise. Look, we can go up to $550,000. That's our absolute max. You're still making a hefty profit. The issue isn't the price, I insisted, though of course the price was absurd. I don't want to sell my home. Period. My father's expression turned cold in a way I'd never seen before. Then I think you need to consider what's important to you, Audrey. If you choose a house over your family's needs, maybe you don't need a family at all. The room fell silent. Are you threatening to disown me if I don't sell my house to Megan? I asked incredulously. He didn't deny it. Family supports family. If you can't do that, then maybe you don't understand what family means. Megan began crying now too, playing her part perfectly in this orchestrated emotional manipulation. "I just want what's best for my children," she sobbed. "Why are you being so cruel?" I stood up, my legs shaking. "I need to go." "Think very carefully about your decision," my father warned as I gathered my purse. "This isn't something you can come back from easily." I left without another word, tears blurring my vision as I drove home to the house that had suddenly become the center of a family war I never asked for. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's angry face, heard my mother's sobs, and replayed the surreal conversation. By morning, exhaustion had given way to a nagging sense that something about the situation didn't add up. Why were Megan and Eric suddenly so desperate for my house specifically? They lived in a perfectly nice 4-bedroom colonial in a respectable neighborhood. While their school district wasn't the absolute top in the area, it was far from problematic. And if schools were truly the concern, why not look at any of the dozen other homes currently for sale in my neighborhood? The timing felt suspicious too. Eric had always been ostentatiously proud of his company's success. At Christmas, he'd boasted about an upcoming funding round that would take things to the next level. Now, suddenly, they couldn't afford a home at market value in my neighborhood? I called in sick to work, something I rarely did, and made a pot of strong coffee. Then I opened my laptop and began researching Eric's company, TechVantage Solutions. Their website was slick and professional, full of corporate buzzwords about innovative solutions and disruptive technologies, but light on specific products or services. Their client testimonials were all from companies I'd never heard of, which seemed odd for a supposedly successful tech firm. Next, I searched for recent news about the company. There wasn't much. A press release from 6 months ago announcing a partnership with another obscure firm, a brief mention in a local business journal's Companies to Watch section from last year. Nothing about the major funding round Eric had mentioned at Christmas. I texted my friend Rachel, who worked in venture capital. "Hey, have you ever heard of TechVantage Solutions? It's my brother-in-law's company." Her response came quickly, "The name sounds familiar. Let me ask around and get back to you." While waiting, I dug deeper into public records. TechVantage had been incorporated 5 years ago, roughly around the time Megan and Eric got engaged. They'd received an initial seed investment from a regional venture fund, followed by a Series A round 2 years later. Since then, nothing. No SEC filings indicating further investment, no reported acquisitions or major contracts. Rachel called me back around noon. "So, I asked some colleagues about TechVantage," she said, her voice carrying the careful neutrality she used when delivering bad news to clients. "It's not great, Audrey. They've been trying to raise a Series B for over a year with no takers. Rumor is they've been burning through cash and haven't hit any of their growth targets." My stomach tightened. "Do you think they're in trouble?" "I can't say for sure without seeing their books, but the whispers aren't positive. One of our associates actually did preliminary due diligence on them 6 months ago and passed. Said the financials were concerning and the technology wasn't as innovative as claimed." After thanking Rachel, I sat staring at my kitchen wall, pieces starting to align in my mind. I remembered Eric's constant phone calls during family gatherings, his tense expressions when stepping away to handle a work situation. The new Range Rover, was it a desperate show of success when things were actually falling apart? I needed more information. I called Thomas, a former colleague who now worked for a commercial real estate firm that handled a lot of tech company leases. "Thomas, this is strange, but do you know anything about TechVantage Solutions? They lease office space in the Westview Tower downtown." Thomas was silent for a moment. "Audrey, is this related to your brother-in-law?" My heart sank. "You know about Eric's company?" "Their clients, or were. Look, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but since it's family, they downsized from their full-floor office to a small suite 3 months ago. Broke their lease and paid a penalty to do it. And I have a buddy in the building who says even that smaller space is barely occupied now." "Did Eric give a reason for the downsizing?" The official line was strategic consolidation as they moved toward a distributed workforce model. But there's been talk. A couple of their senior developers landed at my wife's company last month. Reading between the lines of what she's mentioned, it doesn't sound like an organized transition to remote work. After thanking Thomas and promising to keep the information confidential, I continued my investigation with renewed focus. I checked LinkedIn and found that over a dozen TechVantage employees had changed jobs in the past 3 months. Their company page, once actively updated with product announcements and team-building events, hadn't had a new post in over 60 days. The most damning evidence came from an anonymous tech industry forum where a post from 2 weeks ago caught my eye. "Anyone know what's happening with TechVantage? Heard they missed payroll last week and CEO is looking for a fire sale acquisition." One commenter replied, "Friend works there. Says bankruptcy filing is imminent." Classic case of good idea, bad execution, worse financial management. As evening fell, I sat on my back porch, watching the sunset illuminate the garden I'd painstakingly restored, and pieced together what was likely happening. Eric's company was failing, possibly on the verge of bankruptcy. A bankruptcy that would require disclosure of all assets, examination of recent financial transactions, and potential clawbacks of any assets transferred to avoid creditors. Like, for instance, buying a house from a family member at significantly below market value. The entire scheme suddenly made perfect sense. If they could purchase my house at a family discount before filing bankruptcy, they'd essentially be sheltering hundreds of thousands of dollars from creditors. They'd acquire a valuable asset at a steep discount, possibly even sell it later at full market value after the bankruptcy was settled. And my parents, had they known the full story when they delivered their ultimatum? Or were they simply acting on their lifelong pattern of prioritizing Megan's desires over my well-being? Either way, I was being asked to sacrifice my financial security to rescue Eric and Megan from consequences of their own making. The audacity was staggering, not just asking me to sell my beloved home, but to potentially implicate myself in what could amount to bankruptcy fraud. As anger replaced my initial hurt and confusion, I made a decision. This manipulation had gone far enough. It was time for a family meeting on my terms, with all cards on the table. I spent the next day preparing for what I knew would be a difficult confrontation. I organized the information I'd gathered about Eric's company, printed relevant articles and forum posts, and even prepared a simple spreadsheet showing the true market value of my house compared to their lowball offer. I wasn't just going to refuse their demand, I was going to expose the scheme for what it was. I texted my parents and Megan, "We need to continue our discussion. My house, Thursday at 7 p.m. Eric needs to be there too." My father responded with a terse "We'll be there," while Megan sent back a string of crying emojis, already playing the victim before the conversation had even begun. Thursday evening arrived, and I had arranged my living room deliberately, 4 chairs facing a small table where I'd placed my documentation in a neat folder. I'd even printed out a recent photograph of the house from when I'd first purchased it, contrasted with a current image showing the dramatic transformation from my renovations. A visual reminder of what this property meant beyond its monetary value. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 p.m. My father was nothing if not punctual, especially when he thought he was arriving to close a deal. I opened the door to find my parents and Megan standing on the porch. Eric was conspicuously absent. "Where's Eric?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "He had an important investor meeting he couldn't reschedule," Megan replied, not quite meeting my eyes. "He sends his apologies." "An investor meeting at 7 p.m. on a Thursday?" I raised an eyebrow but stepped aside to let them enter. "How convenient." My mother made a small noise of appreciation as they entered, despite herself. The last time they'd visited had been over a year ago, and I'd completed several significant improvements since then. Refinished hardwood floors in the entryway, new crown molding in the living room, and custom built-in bookshelves flanking the original fireplace. "You've done some nice things with the place," my father admitted grudgingly, before adding, "Megan has some wonderful ideas for updating the kitchen, though." The casual presumption that my home was already theirs to redesign reignited my anger. I gestured toward the arranged seating. Please, sit down. We have a lot to discuss. Once everyone was seated, I remained standing, suddenly feeling like a prosecutor about to present evidence to a jury. I'd been thinking about our conversation on Sunday, I began. About how suddenly urgent it is for Megan and Eric to buy my house, specifically, at a price far below market value. We've been over this, my father interrupted impatiently. It's about the school district and it's about Eric's company failing, I stated flatly, opening the folder and placing several printed articles on the table. TechVantage Solutions is on the verge of bankruptcy, isn't it, Megan? The color drained from my sister's face. For a moment, the mask of entitlement slipped, revealing genuine fear beneath. It was all the confirmation I needed. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, but her eyes darted to the papers on the table. My mother looked confused. What does Eric's company have to do with this? We're talking about what's best for the children. No, Mom. We're talking about Megan and Eric trying to hide assets before a bankruptcy filing. I turned to my sister. That's it, isn't it? Buy my house at a massive discount, get a valuable property on the books before the bankruptcy proceedings begin. Maybe even sell it later at full value after the dust settles. That's ridiculous, my father blustered, but I noticed he wasn't making eye contact either. You've been watching too many legal dramas. I laid out the evidence methodically, the downsized office space, the employee exodus, the missed payroll, the industry rumors. With each point, Megan seemed to physically shrink in her chair. Did you know about all this? I asked my parents directly. Did you know you were asking me to potentially involve myself in bankruptcy fraud? My mother looked genuinely shocked, turning to Megan. Is this true? Is Eric's company in trouble? The dam finally broke. Megan burst into tears, not the calculated crying she'd performed at Sunday dinner, but genuine, body-shaking sobs. We're going to lose everything, she wailed. The house is underwater after we took out a second mortgage to invest in the company. The cars are leased. We've maxed out our credit cards just keeping up appearances for the investors. Eric says if we can just get through the next few months. My father, ever the pragmatist, shifted strategies immediately. Audrey, this is exactly why we need to come together as a family. Megan and the kids need a safety net. We're not talking about fraud, we're talking about helping your sister through a difficult time. By sacrificing my financial security? I asked incredulously. Do you have any idea what you're asking? This house represents my life's work, my independence. And you want me to just hand over hundreds of thousands of dollars in equity because Megan and Eric made poor financial decisions? We would help you too, if you were in trouble, my mother insisted. I couldn't help but laugh. Would you? When have you ever put my needs first? When have you ever made Megan sacrifice anything for my benefit? The question hung in the air, unanswered because we all knew the truth. I'm not selling my house, I stated firmly. Not at a discount, not at market value. It's not for sale. Period. And if Eric is planning a bankruptcy filing while transferring assets, you should know that's illegal. I won't be part of it. My father's expression hardened. Then our position stands as well. If you can't help your sister in her time of need, you're not the daughter we raised. Maybe I'm not, I agreed, surprising myself with the calm that had replaced my earlier anger. Maybe I'm better than that. I built something here that I'm proud of, without help, without handouts, without manipulating others. And I won't apologize for protecting it. Megan looked up, mascara streaking her cheeks. What am I supposed to do? Where will we go when we lose the house? For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old guilt, the lifetime habit of feeling responsible for my sister's happiness. But I extinguished it quickly. That's for you and Eric to figure out. There are rental properties available. You might need to downsize. Your children will adapt, children are resilient when their parents are honest with them. How can you be so cold? My mother demanded. I'm not being cold. I'm being realistic. And I'm refusing to set myself on fire to keep Megan warm, again. I stood up straighter. I think we're done here. I love you all, but I won't be manipulated or guilt into this. My father stood abruptly. Let's go, he said to my mother and Megan. She's made her choice. As they moved toward the door, he turned back to deliver a final blow. Don't call us when you realize what you've thrown away. Family was always available to you, Audrey. Remember that you're the one who rejected it. The door closed behind them with a decisive click, leaving me alone in the house that had become both my sanctuary and the battleground for my independence. The first week after the confrontation passed in a blur of emotions. I fluctuated between righteous anger, crushing doubt, and profound grief. Had I done the right thing? Was my house, any material possession, worth losing my family over? These questions haunted me as I moved through my daily routines like a ghost. Rachel became my lifeline during this period. She came over almost every evening, bringing dinner and providing the reassurance I desperately needed. You didn't choose a house over family, she insisted one night as we sat on my porch. You chose self-respect over exploitation. There's a world of difference. Thomas supported me too, stopping by on weekends to help with small projects around the house, the kind of tasks I'd normally have procrastinated on but now threw myself into as distraction therapy. As we installed a new porch light, he shared his own experiences with family financial manipulation. My brother tried something similar when our grandmother left me her cabin, he confided. Claimed I was selfish for not selling it to him at half its value because he had more kids to enjoy it. Some people believe family entitles them to your resources. Work became both challenge and sanctuary. Several mutual acquaintances who knew both me and Megan had clearly heard a version of events that cast me as the villain. I overheard whispers at industry events, noticed the sudden coolness from people who'd previously been friendly. Rather than engaging with the gossip, I channeled my energy into my clients, achieving my best sales month ever. The most unexpected development came 3 weeks after the confrontation, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Aunt Audrey? A small, uncertain voice came through the speaker. It's Emma. My niece was calling me secretly from a friend's phone. She missed me, she said. Her parents were fighting all the time, and no one would tell her why they couldn't visit my house anymore. We spoke for only a few minutes before she had to go, but that brief connection meant everything to me. I promised her that no matter what happened between the adults, I would always be her aunt and would always love her. The news about Eric's company broke publicly a week later. A brief article in the business section of the local paper announced that TechVantage Solutions had filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy protection, citing unfavorable market conditions and inability to secure additional investment. I felt no satisfaction at being proven right, only sadness for my niece and nephew, whose lives would be upended by their parents' financial collapse. Through industry connections, I learned that Megan and Eric had put their house on the market at a significant loss, unable to keep up with the payments. They were moving to a rental apartment in a neighboring suburb, ironically, one with a lower-rated school district than their current neighborhood. My parents reached out via text message around this time. We should talk about how to help Megan through this difficult transition. No apology, no acknowledgement of their attempts to manipulate me. Just the expectation that I would once again put my sister's needs first. I didn't respond immediately, taking time to process with my therapist, Dr. Levine. I'd started therapy shortly after the confrontation, recognizing that the family rupture had triggered deep-seated patterns and wounds. Dr. Levine helped me understand that my parents' behavior reflected their own limitations, not my worth. You're grieving the family you deserved but never had, she explained during one session. That's different from grieving the actual family you're currently estranged from. This framework helped me navigate the complex emotions I was experiencing, missing my niece and nephew while feeling relieved to be free of the constant expectation to sacrifice for Megan. Through therapy, I also began developing what Dr. Levine called my chosen family, deepening friendships with people who respected my boundaries and celebrated my successes without jealousy. Rachel and Thomas formed the core of this group, along with colleagues and neighbors who provided the community connection I'd lost with my biological family. 4 months after the confrontation, I received a LinkedIn message from Michael Donovan, a commercial property developer I'd worked with on a small project the previous year. He was looking for a real estate partner for a new development and had heard good things about my work. Our professional relationship quickly evolved into friendship, and eventually into something more. Unlike Kevin, Michael respected my ambition and independence. He viewed my house with genuine admiration, appreciating both the financial wisdom and personal effort it represented. "You saw potential where others saw problems," he said during an early date. That's a rare gift. When I eventually shared the full story of my family estrangement, Michael didn't pressure me to reconcile or suggest I'd overreacted. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions about how I was coping and offered support without trying to solve the problem. His respect for my boundaries was refreshingly unfamiliar after a lifetime of having them trampled by my family. 6 months after the confrontation, I received a formal invitation to my parents' anniversary dinner at a local restaurant. The card, in my mother's handwriting, included a brief note: "We miss you. Can we start again?" No apology, but perhaps an olive branch. After discussing it with Dr. Levine, I decided to attend, with clear boundaries and managed expectations. I would not discuss selling my house, would not offer financial assistance to Megan, and would leave if the conversation turned manipulative. The dinner was awkward but civil. My parents seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating than the towering figures of my childhood. Megan was subdued, the financial reality of bankruptcy having tempered her sense of entitlement. Eric was absent, having moved out 3 weeks earlier, another detail Megan shared with resignation rather than distress. No one apologized explicitly for the attempted manipulation or ultimatum. But my father did mention, while discussing their retirement plans, "We've learned recently that material security isn't something to take for granted." Coming from him, this was as close to an acknowledgement of wrongdoing as I was likely to get. I maintained my boundaries throughout the evening, steering conversations away from financial topics and focusing on my niece and nephew. Before leaving, I made a private decision: I would establish college funds for Emma and Jacob. My sister and parents didn't need to know. This would be between me and the children when they were old enough to understand. As I drove home to my beloved house, now a symbol not just of financial wisdom but of emotional strength, I felt a complex mixture of sadness and liberation. My relationship with my family would never be what I'd hoped for as a child. But I had finally broken free of the expectation to diminish myself for Megan's benefit. The house lights welcomed me as I pulled into the driveway, warm and steady against the darkening sky. Inside these walls, I had created not just a home, but a testament to my own worth. No one could take that away from me, not family, not circumstance, not guilt. For perhaps the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely free. 6 months after that tentative anniversary dinner, I sat across from my parents at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between their house and mine. The seasonal decorations and soft background music created an atmosphere far removed from the tension-filled confrontation in my living room a year earlier. "Emma's teacher says she's shown remarkable improvement this semester," my mother commented, showing me a school progress report on her phone. "She's really adapted well, all things considered." "Kids are resilient," I replied, remembering my own words from that painful night. "Especially when the adults in their lives are honest with them." My father nodded, a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago, acknowledging that I might have been right about something related to parenting. These small shifts in our dynamic had accumulated gradually over months of cautious rebuilding. We weren't close, probably never would be in the way I'd once hoped, but we had established a workable relationship based on clearer boundaries. Megan and Eric's post-bankruptcy life had settled into a new normal. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago, with Eric moving to Chicago to work for a former colleague's startup. Megan had found a job as an office manager at a dental practice, her first stable employment in years, and was renting a modest townhouse in a middle-class neighborhood. The children split their time between parents, adapting to their new circumstances with the flexibility unique to the young. What surprised me most was how Megan herself had changed. The bankruptcy and divorce had stripped away her sense of entitlement, forcing her to develop self-reliance she'd never needed before. At Emma's birthday party the previous month, which I'd attended at my niece's insistent request, Megan had pulled me aside. "I get it now," she'd said quietly, watching Emma open presents with her friends. "What it feels like to build something yourself. To know you earned it." She hadn't apologized for the attempt to take my house, but this acknowledgement felt significant nonetheless. I hadn't offered financial help directly to Megan, that boundary remained important, but I had secretly established trust funds for Emma and Jacob, to be revealed when they reached college age. My attorney had structured the trusts to ensure the money could only be used for education, preventing any attempt to redirect the funds to other purposes. My own life had blossomed in unexpected ways. Michael and I had been dating for 8 months, our relationship deepening into something that felt sustainably real. Unlike previous partners who'd been intimidated by my independence or financial acumen, Michael celebrated these qualities. "You've built something remarkable," he told me one evening as we sat on my porch swing. "Not just the house, but the life you've created on your terms." Professionally, I'd leveraged my experience and reputation to establish a boutique real estate consultancy specializing in property investment strategies for first-time buyers. The work was deeply satisfying, helping others, particularly women, build financial security through smart property decisions. My house remained my sanctuary, evolving as I evolved. I'd converted the smaller bedroom into a home office, installed solar panels, and expanded the garden to include a small vegetable patch. Each improvement reflected not just financial investment but emotional ownership. This space was mine, earned through perseverance and protected through conviction. My parents had never explicitly apologized for their ultimatum or their lifetime of favoritism. But their behavior had changed in subtle ways that suggested some level of reflection. My mother occasionally asked about my business with genuine interest. My father had stopped making dismissive comments about my choice to remain in that old house and had even asked for advice when they considered downsizing for retirement. "We're thinking of looking at condos in lakeside gardens," my mother mentioned during our cafe meeting. Would you be willing to look at a few places with us? Give us your professional opinion?" The request, tentative, respectful of my expertise, represented a seismic shift in our relationship. A year ago, they would have consulted with Megan despite her lack of real estate knowledge, then informed me of their decision. "I'd be happy to help," I replied, setting a boundary even within my agreement. "I can dedicate a Saturday morning in 2 weeks. I'll send some preliminary listings to review before then." As we parted ways outside the cafe, my father hesitated, then said something that caught me completely off guard. "Your house, it really is beautiful, what you've done with it. You saw something there that no one else did." The words were simple, but the acknowledgement they contained was profound. After a lifetime of seeking validation that never came, I found I no longer needed it, but appreciated it nonetheless. Driving home, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The ultimatum that had seemed catastrophic had actually been the catalyst for profound growth and change. By refusing to sacrifice my home, my achievement, my security, my sanctuary, I had broken a lifelong pattern of diminishing myself to maintain peace. The house that had been the focal point of such conflict now stood as a testament to something far more valuable than its considerable market worth. It represented the moment I had finally declared my own value, refusing to be leveraged or diminished for someone else's benefit. As I pulled into my driveway, Michael's car was already parked at the curb. He was waiting on the porch with takeout from our favorite restaurant and a bottle of wine, ready to hear about my day. This too was new territory, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than sacrifice, with someone who saw my strength as an asset rather than a threat. We sat on the porch swing as evening fell, the string lights I'd installed along the eaves casting a warm glow across the garden. The neighborhood kids played a noisy game of tag on the sidewalk, while the elderly couple next door walked their small dog, waving as they passed. This community, this home, this life, all of it built through choices that honored my own worth. You know, I told Michael as we watched the sky turn from blue to purple to indigo, the hardest no I ever said became the most important yes to myself. Sometimes protecting what you've built isn't selfish, it's self-preservation. And in that preservation, I found not just financial security, but something far more valuable: peace. The house stood solid behind us, its century-old foundation supporting not just walls and floors, but the life I had chosen for myself, imperfect, occasionally lonely, but authentically mine. I often think about that confrontation, about what might have happened if I'd given in to the pressure, sacrificed my security to maintain the appearance of family harmony. The financial loss would have been substantial, but the cost to my self-worth would have been incalculable. Instead, I chose myself, perhaps for the first time, and discovered that in doing so, I created space for relationships based on respect rather than obligation, love rather than manipulation, truth rather than comfortable lies. I think about Emma and Jacob too, hoping that somewhere in their observation of these adult conflicts, they've absorbed a lesson about standing firm in their own worth, about building lives that belong truly to themselves. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting something you've built? Would you have made the same decision I did? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more about navigating complex family dynamics and building financial independence. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most important family to protect is yourself. Until next time, take care of your hearts and your homes.